Welcome back to the Champagne on Ice podcast presented by the Field of 68. The holiday weekend is over. Illinois has a big-time neutral site win over Arkansas. Conference play is getting underway in the Big Ten. I see Big Ten basketball games on the slate for Tuesday and Wednesday night, and Illinois' conference opener not far behind. And we are going to get into all of it here on this episode. I am Kyle Tausk, joined as always by Mike Farmer. Mike, how was the Thanksgiving weekend?
I had a good week, man. Huge Illinois win over Arkansas, as we mentioned. Probably a quad one win come March. Just great all-around performance from the Illini. My Bears choked another game, but that led to Matt Eberflus getting canned, thank God. So that was actually the highlight of my week. But yeah, great week overall, but good to be back on campus.
Yeah, how much did that Illini game save you that it came on right after that Bears collapse?
That was perfect, man. Yeah, the whole family was pretty down about the another choke for the fourth week in a row. But then 50% shooting from three, the Europeans went off, the draft picks from future draft picks went off. Just yeah, great game to watch.
It was a heck of a performance from Illinois, and let's get right into it. Illinois and Arkansas took the floor in Kansas City on Thanksgiving, and Illinois put together their most complete performance of the season, at least in my opinion, given the quality of opponent and the way that they won, going up 11-0 early, forcing an early Arkansas timeout, and then never letting the Razorbacks get back within 9 points the rest of the game. It was kind of the opposite game script of how Alabama went for Illinois, where they fell behind so big early and kind of tried to inch closer, made a couple little runs, but never could get within 7 or 8. And it was a similar story here on the other end of things. Illinois kept Arkansas at arm's length the entire time. And like you said, the two stars of the day, Kasparis Yakachonis, 23 points, including 14 straight late in the second half to close the game, and Tomislav Ivicic, 21 points, 10 rebounds. He won the battle of the Ivicics, the brother battle. He's going to get the bragging rights in that one, as he went 6 for 9 from three and is now shooting 38% from three on the year. And Illinois wins at 90-77. Currently, as the net rankings first got released, the first ones of the season got released this morning, Monday morning, Illinois comes in the top 10. They slot in number 10. Arkansas 51st, so one spot away from being a quad one win. But like you said, I think by the end of the year, it'll slide into that quad one territory. What was your biggest takeaway from this game? How encouraged were you by this performance from Illinois?
Super encouraged. We talked a lot last week about how Illinois has a lot of chances for quad one wins, these huge resume wins for your tournament resume come March, and Illinois pulled one off against Arkansas. Pretty much exactly what we wanted to see all around. Like phenomenal shooting night. The defense did its part. Certain guys like KJ and Tommy just kind of erupted and showed the nation who they are as prospects and as college basketball players this year. Like, you really don't have any complaints. Obviously, some things you can comment on, but I'm not really worried about that right now. Great shooting night. Guys hit the shots when they needed to. They started super hot and really didn't tail off at all. They stayed pretty consistent throughout the whole night, hitting shots when they needed to. KJ got hot at the end. Tommy Slav hitting threes throughout the whole game. Ben Hummerkaus hitting three threes during the game. Like really just all around complete performance. So yeah, I don't know. Like that's exactly what Brad Underwood wanted to see. That's what the fan base wanted to see. And they showed the whole world, the whole college basketball world on CBS on Thanksgiving. It's exactly what we wanted to see.
The offense is exactly what Brad Underwood envisioned, I think, when he was building this roster. That version of this Illinois offense is like what it looks like when it's all clicking against a quality opponent. It was a really impressive offensive performance, and it was an Arkansas team that came into the game, I think, 7th in the country in defensive efficiency early. Obviously, the schedule can skew that a little bit, but it was a good Arkansas team, a team that was turning people over at a top 40 rate in the country. Illinois, 11 turnovers. You'll take that in a 69 possession game against an athletic athletic team like Arkansas. And yeah, 31 threes go up, 15 of them go in. You have your best shooting performance of the year after some, really it was three or four kind of colder ones in a row. But you get back to 48.4% there. And yeah, obviously Humrikaus 3 for 4, but Avicic 6 for 9. I mean, that is exactly why you brought this guy here to Illinois and what he can impact the offense with in terms of that pick and pop game that Illinois went to on two of their first three possessions. He made 2 threes early in the game and just kept getting to him, kept finding different ways to get to him. Arkansas kind of adjusted the way they were guarding. I mean, they left him wide open the first couple shots, and then they kind of tried rotating over to him, and he's just able to get that shot off. And when you're running that two-man game with him and KJ, boy, that's really hard to stop. And it's going to be really hard to stop for any opponent. When you get in the Big Ten, if you just run a straight ball screen with Avicic setting one for Kasparis Yakichonis, and if you're going to sit and drop coverage, KJ's going to pick you apart. I mean, if you're going to leave Tomislav space to pop and shoot a three, he's going to pick you apart. It's just, we saw it all on display there, and Arkansas really had no answer for Illinois' offense. I thought Brad Underwood outcoached the hell out of John Calipari in this game, too. Felt like Arkansas just had no idea how to counteract Illinois' offense the entire game, and that's pretty encouraging because, yeah, it's an Arkansas team that's pretty new. They've got one returner. It's similar to Illinois. It's a bunch of talent that's kind of trying to figure itself out, and I'm sure they'll get better as the season goes on, as Illinois will. But that's a really quality opponent. That's a team with a lot more size and athleticism than a lot of lower tier Big Ten teams that are going to be on your schedule. Like, to beat that team as handily as Illinois beat them, that's why you see them all of a sudden jump all the way back to 19th in the AP poll. They're top 10 in the net. Like, this is a win that's going to carry a lot of weight, I think, as the season goes on, even if Arkansas is not some marquee top 10 team come season's end, which I don't necessarily think they'll be that. I think they'll be the top 4 or 5 of the SEC, and this is kind of that statement win that we were looking for from Illinois, and also one that kind of proved that, yeah, this team can be who they thought we were, who we thought they were, because up until that point, you had the exhibition against Ole Miss and the game against Alabama. Both did not go well for Illinois, and you had beat up on some lower tier teams, but now you beat up on a real team and a team with a lot of talent, and Illinois just made quick work of them. It was really impressive.
Yeah, huge for the resume and just like the upcoming schedule. That helps a lot too because you got a talented Northwestern team, Wisconsin coming up, Tennessee eventually, Mizzou eventually, and then the whole Big Ten slate. Like, I think it could be a decent Big Ten this year. There's a handful of pretty bad teams, handful of really good teams, and then a lot of teams that are probably going to be on the bubble fighting for tournament spots. But yeah, this is just a great win to really start what could be a nice run for Illinois if they play their cards right. But yeah, with the KJ Tommy two-man game, like that was so electric. Like it pretty much worked the entire game. And if those two get hot early in a game, it just opens up the offense completely. Like because KJ can just dominate whatever he can do whatever he wants to do in the passing game, getting downhill. He can shoot the three ball by himself. And then the same thing with Tommy. Like he didn't do much in the low post this game because he's facing his 7'2" big brother, but he can shoot the three as he did in this game, shooting 6 for 9 from deep. He can pass as well. So like when that unlocks the whole offense, and now you have Kylan Boswell, Ben Hummerkaus, maybe Will Riley even just sitting around the perimeter in the corners, like it's a really scary offense because you've got 40% three-point shooters, 50% in Will Riley's case early on in the season. Just yeah, it can be a really lethal offense at times. But yeah, I thought KJ and Boswell were like as good as they've been all year in this game. Scoring wise, of course, KJ had 21. I think Boswell had 20 or 18 or something like that. But then the
18,
passing game
5,
too,
and
like
6 for Kylan.
yeah, that's really scary from a backcourt putting up combined 40, 10, and 10, I'm sure. But yeah, I thought they were really good in the playmaking game. Like I thought they got downhill pretty well. They didn't just find shooters, like they did find shooters, but then they also found guys cutting, guys rolling, just like creating opportunities for guys to get open shots, which we hadn't seen a ton from Kylan Boswell up until this point. But the past couple games, he's been really good as a playmaker, so that's been encouraging to see. Tomislav was great. Will Riley didn't do a whole lot. I predicted him to go off, but he didn't really. He was kind of limited. Um, But yeah, Ben Hummerkaus, huge shots down the stretch and early on in the game. Dre had some nice plays off the bench. Merez was a beast like always. He's just so fun to watch off the bench. Yeah, just we've said it, but it was a really complete performance, really dominant, led from tip to finish. Going up 11-0 is huge to start the game. Like as you mentioned, the Alabama game was kind of similar, but just opposite roles, obviously. Illinois was trailing in that game. And that's just demoralizing. Like you saw, Arkansas try to come back a couple times. They had some nice momentum plays, but then all of a sudden, KJ hits a big three. Ben Hummerkaus hits a three. Boswell has a step back or some and one or something. Like that just takes the life out of a team. And the Arkansas fans were trying to get back into it. The Illinois fans were shutting them up. Like it was just a complete performance.
Yeah, that backcourt was really fun to watch, and they kind of took turns at different times in the game. Felt like Kylan really set the tone pretty early offensively. He had a big first half. I think he had 12 or 13 points in the first half. Then obviously you had KJ close the game in the way he did, but those two guys are both playing at a really high level right now. Particularly, we talked about with Boswell, like he has the ability to be a lot more offensively than he was early in the season, or even he was at times with Arizona. And I feel like we've seen a mindset shift with him in the last 3 or 4 games where he has actively tried to look for his own offense, and he's just gotten more aggressive when it comes to getting downhill, putting his head down, using his physicality to get to the rim. And it doesn't always end in a finish. He's realized too that I can create a lot of gravity driving the basketball, and that's going to lead to open shots for other guys. And I think you've seen the assist numbers go up for him the last couple. Had 7 against, I believe that was Little Rock, and then 6 here against Arkansas. And then, yeah, 18 points, 6 of 10 from the floor, 1 of 4 from 3. Still hasn't found that 3-point shot. It's only shooting 22%. But you've seen him start to score a little bit more and just be a little more assertive offensively, which I think you need from him because you're going to get the fluctuations from Will Riley. We saw it wasn't his best night. KJ, for as good as he was in this game, we've also seen him struggle in that Oakland game and some games where he'll turn the ball over and maybe you can't trust him quite as much with the ball in his hands. That's where a guy like Kylan, I've been begging for him to just kind of take over that veteran leadership type of role and just be a consistent presence for this team. And he's been really consistent the last 3 or 4 games ever since that slow start in terms of what he brings. And oh, by the way, Boogie Fland of Arkansas, former 5-star kid who was off to a heck of a start to the season, 2 for 12 from the floor, 8 points. And Kylan did a lot of that. Wasn't all him. Boogie did miss some open shots. Illinois sat back and dropped with Tomislav, and he missed some mid-range jumpers. But Kylan cut off a lot of his driving angles, didn't really let him get downhill at all in this game, and he's explosive when he can do that, continues to just lock down opposing guards and be a dominant defender. So he's just continues to play really well. But how about KJ, man? 14 straight points to close the game out. It was kind of Io-like a little bit, just in terms of it's closing time, it's winning time. I'm put the ball in my hands, I'm going to go make shots. And he did it in a few different ways. Got to the rim with a little lefty up and over shot over this. I think it was Zvonimir Ivisic, who was in there 7-2, and he laid one in over him. Got to the free throw line twice, and then hit a step back 3 and a pull up jump shot. Like he can score it too. Like we're asking for it early in the year. We're like, does he need to be a little more? Does he need to take over the game a little more offensively? Well, he did that when it mattered in the second half, and this team's going to need that guy. There's going to be some closer games than even this one was, where you got to put the ball in someone's hands and not just expect them to make the right pass, but also, hey, go create a shot for themselves. And KJ sure showed the ability to do that. It was awesome to see him just take the game over and destroy Arkansas's drop coverage late. He put him in a ball screen and it's over.
Yeah, it seemed like he just like something flipped when he saw Arkansas hit a couple shots. They started to get back into it just a little bit. And like you said, he just took over, like step back threes, get into the hoop, just pretty much doing everything you'd want to see out of a potential first round draft pick, potential top 10 draft pick at this point, because he's just been phenomenal this year. But back to your point about Boswell, obviously, like on the court, stats wise, everything wise, he's been a lot better the past couple games. But I think just his energy has been better. Like I could hear him on the broadcast. I don't know if it was a hot mic or something. You could hear him just like screaming and yelling at people. He had an and one, he had a block, and you could just hear him screaming on the broadcast like several times throughout the Arkansas game. So like when you're talking about leadership and just a mentality shift and a guy that struggled the first couple games, and even if he's saying he's like staying positive, that's still tough to go through. And so seeing it on the court, just seeing his mentality go from maybe down a little bit just to being the same Kylan Boswell he was at times at Arizona and the same Kylan Boswell we know he can be. That was just phenomenal, and that was great for this team. Just really unlocks a whole new level that this team can reach, and that they did reach against Arkansas. But yeah, KJ, I mean, this backcourt has so much potential. They were hyped up as one of the best backcourts in the Big Ten going into this season, and I think that's pretty warranted. Like, I don't see any reason to argue with that at this point. And Boswell hasn't even been the guy we expected him to be fully. His stats are like the exact same as they were for his sophomore year at Arizona, like 9, 3, and 3. So I don't think you can really complain about that. But I think we have a feeling there's a whole new level Boswell can reach offensively at least.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. You've seen kind of that emotional piece of it come out with him, the emotional leadership, even more than anything, to where he's the guy that's showing the most fire and toughness on the floor, I feel like. And that's something I think you read back to some of the parting things that were said about him leaving Arizona, and it's like, well, it's just not that engaged all the time, and there's certain games where he disappears, and that's not what I've seen from him. And I mean, yeah, he slow started the year a little bit, but I didn't necessarily feel like he was disengaged either. I thought he just was missing some shots, was just a little hesitant in terms of his own offensive game. But you've seen him just kind of come out and be that consistent presence. And I agree with you. You've seen some emotion show from him, and just it feels like a guy that's kind of commanding a huddle right now, which I think you're going to need. And I think you have a lot of guys that are capable of doing it. I've seen KJ do it as an 18-year-old, but Kylan's kind of the guy, especially with how many minutes he's going to play. I mean, he's a consistent 30-minute a game guy. You could tell Brad never wants to take him off the floor because even if he's not making shots, his defensive value is immense. But yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, defensively as a whole for Illinois in this game, I thought really impressive work. I know Arkansas had some struggles offensively. There were sometimes I wasn't sure exactly what Arkansas was running. I think John Calipari has some things to figure out there. You did end up sending Adu Thero to the free throw line 21 times in this game. Some of those I think were a little bit bailouty, to make up a word there, but he only made 12 of them. But and we knew that was going to be a matchup that Illinois was going to struggle with, because we talked about it in our preview last week, like who's guarding a really athletic 6'8", I think he's 6'8", wing like that, who just is a bulldozer downhill. I didn't think Illinois had a great matchup for him. They didn't. As a whole, though, I thought Illinois guarded as well as we've seen. Really, I mean, and given the opponent, too. Obviously, you hold a team to 34 a week ago, but obviously there were a lot of questions about Illinois defensively coming off what they did in that exhibition game, and then Alabama was really, really poor, gave up 100 to them, felt like they could do whatever they want, felt like Illinois had no answers. And in this game, I thought there were stretches where Illinois guarded really hard and forced Arkansas into that mid-range area, forced some tough shots, really took Big Z, Zvonimir Ivisic, out of the game because they were basically drop switching him and not allowing him to do the same thing that Tommy was doing on the other end. They weren't allowing Arkansas to get into a pick and pop game because they would just switch those ball screens basically while still kind of staying in drop coverage. They'd have the guard switch onto him and take away his three-point shot, make the guard coming off the screen go against Big T, who actually did a pretty good job guarding out on the perimeter. You had Merez show some things as well, but I was encouraged by what I saw. I think this team has the potential to really improve on the defensive end, and you're going to have teams that have some tougher matchups for you and teams that are a little more polished and execute a little better than Arkansas probably did in this game offensively. But you hold this team to 77, and there were some stretches where Arkansas couldn't get anything going. And coming off the Alabama game against a team that's got plenty of offensive talent, I was impressed by the job Illinois did on that end of the floor.
Yeah, I'm definitely encouraged too. I'm not going to say I'm sold on Illinois being a great defensive team yet. I don't think anybody is. But yeah, for sure encouraging when you're just looking at a roster of the entire roster is new. They've never played defense together. The offense is where it's at. We had a feeling it would be good. It is good. Defense, we weren't so sure, but it's looked pretty decent so far, like you said. I think Arkansas has their fair share of issues themselves, being a new team, a new roster of just guys that haven't played together. I think Boogie Flan's being tasked with a bit too much, especially in the passing game. Like you look at like John L. Davis and Adu Thero, I don't think they
They're getting
really
nothing from John L. That's weird.
that was weird because he dominated Illinois last year. High scoring game, obviously, but like he had 3 shot attempts in this game. So yeah, they took him away. Thero got to the line a bunch. Big Z, like you said, didn't do a ton. And then yeah, DJ Wagner didn't do much. So like I don't know. I thought Illinois played pretty well defensively. Arkansas did miss a lot of open shots, I would say. Missed a
Yeah.
lot of free throws too. But yeah, encouraged for sure. Um, but like you look back to last year and Illinois had the potential to be a good defensive team, and they were through about a month or two, I want to say. And then all of a sudden, I think TSJ was gone. The defensive energy kind of just fell off a cliff and never bounced back at all. Illinois went into the tournament being like the 80th best defense or something like that. So hopefully we're hoping for a bit of a different story this year. They've started pretty well. I'm not convinced until I see it really sustain a pretty good level throughout the start of Big Ten play. But yeah, we're just gonna have to wait and see. I like where they're at right now, though.
Yeah, and this is an Arkansas team that's currently 75th in offensive efficiency in the country. And I don't know what's going on there, but I think Calipari's still kind of learning that team. I just thought they were out of sorts at times, and there were some possessions where I just thought they executed terribly or didn't really execute anything because there wasn't anything that they were really running. But they're going to figure that out. I do think, yeah, it's an Arkansas team that has some things to work through, but based on the comparison to that Alabama game, I think Illinois showed some improvement. And coming off 2 games where they were phenomenal on the defensive end against 2 low-tier opponents, holding teams to 40 and 34 in the 2 previous games, the effort isn't the issue with this team. I think you have good defenders, and I think the principles are sound. We've seen these defensive principles that Brad has kind of made a staple of this program work successfully quite often. But I think as this team continues to get more comfortable playing it and learning it, I think they'll get better. I still think it's a flawed defensive team, and there's certain matchups, absolutely. And actually, I think a couple in this upcoming game that can get exploited and just matchups Illinois doesn't have an answer for. But I thought it was encouraging to see the improvement they made on that end of the floor. Before we get into Northwestern, I want to quickly kind of just take a moment here. It's December 3rd when this podcast gets released, and we're about to start a pretty big stretch for Illinois here of 5 quad one games out of their next 6, including 2 more big non-conference games and 2 conference games upcoming. We're through a month of the season now. Illinois played 7 games. They're 6-1. Mentioned earlier, they're top 10 in the first net rankings. They're 15th on KenPom, 19th in the AP poll. Let's just take a moment and kind of grade this first month of the year. And I kind of want to go team as a whole and then kind of go through this lineup and just kind of give a grade of what we've seen from these guys. This 7-game mark, about a quarter of the way through the season, I think is a good mark to just kind of do this exercise real quick. So for Illinois, the team as a whole, the 6-1 start, you can use whatever scale you want, compare it to your expectations, compare it just the results in general. What grade would you give Illinois' month of November?
Team wide, I'm gonna go. I'll say A minus because I mean they're pretty much where I expected them to be record wise at least. I did think they'd beat Arkansas. Did not think they'd beat Alabama. Haven't really had any scares in bye games as some other teams have. The Oakland game was low possession, kind of close, but I'm not really worried about that game. That's not a season long something I'm worried about. So yeah, 1-1 in the huge game so far. Love what I'm seeing from the offense. Love what I'm seeing from individuals, as we'll get into in a second. And then defensively, like we just talked about it, better than we expected, probably better than Brad Underwood expected at this rate. The Bama game was a bit worrying, but I mean, that's one of the top 5 offenses in the country with a roster of 22-year-olds. Like, I don't think anybody's complaining about that. So A minus. Some huge games coming up, but I'm pretty confident with my A minus pick.
I'm going to give them an A because I'll say this. I'm going to grade it based on kind of, like you said, where I expected them to be at this point. I didn't expect them to run the table in November, knowing you were playing Alabama and Arkansas. And really, the two results went about how I thought. I just thought that Alabama game was going to be tough. Now, Alabama hasn't been as great in some of their other games as you would have expected. They do have two losses, lost to Oregon. We're in a tight game with Rutgers, obviously lost at Purdue. So it's maybe not the top two team in the country so far this year. But man, I still think they're really good. I thought Illinois, while they lost that game pretty convincingly, it went about how I would have thought. I honestly didn't expect Illinois to put together a performance as impressive as they did on Thanksgiving this early in the year. I thought it was going to take more time. And honestly, you could say the same about some of these bye games where you beat the OVC favorite Little Rock by 58 and hold them to 34 points. You blow out a Southern Illinois Edwardsville team who's going to probably finish in the top 2 or 3 of that conference. You absolutely dominate Maryland Eastern Shore. Like there just hasn't been, other than that Oakland game and the Alabama game, as much of like a learning curve as I would have thought with this team. That's not to say that they're going to not improve a lot, and there's still going to be some of that ups and downs with this team, but I'm pretty satisfied with where they are heading into this stretch in December. To see what it looked like on Thursday against Arkansas and to see that version of this team show up on Thanksgiving on November 28th, I didn't think we were going to get that version of this team till January at the earliest. I didn't know if KJ was going to be capable of having a performance like that where on a neutral floor against a top 25 opponent, he can put up 14 straight points. I didn't know if Kylan Boswell was going to flip the switch this yet to be playing as well as he was to be this much of a lockdown defender. I didn't know that Tomislav Ivisic was probably going to be the best big man in the Big Ten through a month. That's arguable, but he's up there. You look at the numbers. I'm pretty satisfied with where this team is at. I'm giving them an A for November. 6-1 with the way they did it, I think is a perfect spot to be. Now, December is going to be very important for that, but I think this team's in a fantastic spot right now, and I think you've seen the improvement game over game as well, which is important. Let's go through. Let's start with the freshmen here. I mean, Kasparis Yakichonis, can you give him anything lower than an A so far? The guy's been phenomenal.
I don't know if you can go lower than A plus. Like freshman point, he's 18 years old. Freshman point guard averaging 14, 6, and 6. That's better than sophomore Braden Smith, the comparison I made last week. I don't know. I like making that comparison because I'm not a huge fan of Purdue or Braden Smith, but 14, 6, and 6 just dominated a top 25 team in Arkansas. I mean, he's had quieter games, but like he's 18 years old. It's a freshman point guard. We've seen how many terrible freshman point guards there have been in college basketball recently. I mean, this freshman class as a whole, countrywide, has been amazing. Gage has been a huge part of that. Like I have zero complaints. He's been amazing.
And he's just so in control and so advanced with his passing ability and his command of a college offense already. And you look at the efficiency even. I mean, he's had a couple slower offensive games, shooting 50% from the floor, 36% from three, 3.6 turnovers. I expected that. Like, and again, I mentioned it last episode. I don't care about the turnover number right now because you're going to have to live with some of those. And I also think those will improve as he gets more comfortable. I mean, he's been everything as advertised, and you've seen that rewarded. I looked at 2 mock drafts earlier this morning. He's in the top 7 in both of them. So he's going to make a lot of money, I think, and he's just going to continue to get better. And I got another, I agree with you on that grade, by the way. I got a second A plus to give out, and it's Tomislav Ivisic. I mean, he's exceeded any expectation that I've had of him coming in here, and he's been the most consistent player on this Illinois team so far. Hasn't had an off game all year. I mean, really, it maybe a couple quieter games, and hasn't had a bad game yet through 7 games. For a guy making the transition, I know he was playing in kind of a semi-pro league in the Adriatic League, but to come over, make the transition to the United States, to college basketball, to show up and play great in both of Illinois' big games so far against Alabama and Arkansas, up to 38.2% from three so far. Now, after kind of a slow start on that, and 56% from the floor, rebounding it at a great rate, 9 boards a game so far. I feel like his defense has been serviceable, and he showed some things in that Arkansas game in terms of being able to handle a switch onto a guard and do it pretty effectively. I couldn't have a single complaint if I tried to think of one of the way Avicic has played, and he's been unbelievably important to what Illinois has done.
Yeah, I'm completely with you. I kept saying this. I really don't know why I thought this, but I wasn't sold on Tomislav at all coming into Illinois. Like I was sure he'd be a rotation piece, maybe even start the year as a starter and play solid, play whatever. I mean, he's been phenomenal. Like I'm gonna keep making these stat comparisons because I don't know. I look at stats all day. It's fun for me. Second team All-American sophomore and first team All Big Ten Kofi Coburn his sophomore year averaged 18 and 9. Tommy Slav's averaging 16 and 9 in his first 7 games as a college player. Like, there's no complaints. Obviously, completely different players, different teams, different years. I don't really care. It's for the narrative. Tomislav has been amazing. Zero complaints. A plus.
And just how hard he makes Illinois' offense to guard if he can shoot it. Like, yeah, he's not going to shoot 6 for 9 every night, but I mean, you heard John Calipari. I found it funny. He said in this post game, he's like, "Well, we were going to make the big fella shoot it or something." I'm like, okay, I get it. He was shooting 28% coming into the game, but this guy's got 3 years of pro film out there. He can shoot the ball. It was only a matter of time before he's going to have a game like that. If he got 9 open looks to make 6 of them, and I think Brad Underwood said he could be a mid-40s shooter in the preseason. I said that's a little crazy. I didn't get to 40. I think the shot is good enough to be a 40% shooter for this team. All right, Will Riley. Slower game, but what would you give him so far through 7 games?
I, I might be going crazy on these grades, but I don't know how you can go lower than I'll say A. I'm going A. I'm not going to go A plus just for the sake of not giving out 4 A pluses to 4 freshmen. But A, like, granted, he's a 5 star, but he's also a reclassified high school senior, averaging, I think he's down to like 15 points a game, 50% shooting from three. Has been dominant in like 4 of the 7 games. Was quieter against Arkansas. We'll give him that. He's been shooting a bit worse, and his average is down to only 50%. Like, I don't know. A, like, you can't. There's just I don't have any complaints.
I agree with you. Yeah, and the other thing I've appreciated about him is he hasn't tried to force himself into action either. A lot of his offense has come naturally within the flow, and when Illinois needed it, when he's had shots available to him, it hasn't been a situation where he's stepped in, and he's capable of going and taking the basketball and scoring. And there's a lot of freshmen that would come in with his offensive pedigree coming out of high school and coming out of AAU, and he could easily have had some games where he was 2 for 13 from the floor and he just continued to take bad shots after bad shots. I think his shot selection has been more than fine. He's taken some tougher pull-up shots. He can make those shots. I don't have as much of a problem with him taking them as some other guys on this team. And he just hasn't forced himself. He didn't have a great game against Arkansas, but he also wasn't forcing himself into the action and taking a bunch of bad shots and taking opportunities away from KJ on a night where he was cooking and taking opportunities away from Tomislav Avicic, and that's what's impressed me. And I also think he's been pretty solid. At least the effort has been solid defensively, even if he can get exploited in some matchups. So for him to average 15 points, shoot 50% from three through his first 7 games, have a 31-point debut, and have 19 and I think 19 and 8 against Alabama in a game where he tried to lead Illinois back, that's an A for me for an 18-year-old reclass freshman. Absolutely. Kylan Boswell. What do you give him?
Um, you got to factor in all the 7 games. Obviously, he's been much better the past 2 or 3, whatever. So I'll stick with B maybe. Like, the defense has been there consistently throughout the 7 games. Offense was really quiet to start. He's kind of emerged as a leader the past couple games, just visibly, like on the TV screen. Um, So yeah, I'll go B. The stats, like I mentioned this earlier, his stats are pretty much identical to where he was last year at Arizona as a starter. 3-point percentage is down a bit, of course, to 22, like you said earlier. So I'll go with B. I think he definitely has the potential to elevate that grade, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if he does.
I'll give him a B plus, and the reason for that is his defense has been like all American level, in my opinion. I think the way he's guarded so far this year is worth like an entire letter grade in it of itself. Holding Mark Sears to 0 points is still something that needs to be on his resume, even if his shooting splits aren't there. And I just like what I've seen, the progression from him, the way he's gotten comfortable. I don't care all that much about the slow first couple games in which you didn't really need him. I agree it needs to be factored in there, but I'm a huge Kylan Boswell fan. Tweeted about him during the Arkansas game. I just love everything about what he brings, and I think he has the ability. If he plays like he did against Arkansas consistently, that's an A player right there. But yeah, the offensive struggles in terms of shooting splits and the slower start, I think holds him off that A line for me. But the guy's guarding his ass off every night for this team, and it's been pretty impressive. Benham Rickhouse, interesting case here. Shooting 43% from three so far, averaging 10 points a game. Everything that you would have wanted from him as a three-point shooter. Not sure he's given you a whole lot else. I do think there's a little still to be desired from Ben, especially in the rebounding department. A guy at 6'9" is one of your starting forwards, 3 rebounds a game so far through 7 games. I think he can assert himself on the glass a little bit more, play a little more physical. I know that's not really his game, but I would like to see a little bit more from that. I do think he's had his defensive struggles, although I think he's battled on that end, and he's had some games, especially against some of the lower level competition, where he's caused some havoc, has some deflections, a couple blocks. I think he had 2 blocks in that Little Rock game. I give Ben a B minus. I think there's more that he can show offensively. I think there's a little more still to his game that we haven't seen, and I think the defensive limitations are always going to hold him back. But you got him to be a floor spacer and a shooter with some size to put in that lineup, a guy that's going to make your offense tough to guard at 6'9". He's shooting 42.9% from 3 so far. So for me to have him anything lower than the B line would be disrespectful.
Yeah, you said exactly what I wanted to say. I'm going B. He came here to be a 3-point shooter. There was talk of him being like a sleeper NBA draft prospect. Haven't really seen that yet this year. People were calling him the next Marcus Damask, a guy that could maybe sneak on a G League team or something. I haven't seen that yet, but he came here to be a 3-point shooter. He's been knocked down 43%. It seems like he hits a couple every game. And then yeah, he's had a couple blocks. I've seen that. Seems like he's at 1 block every game. He's been a bit more physical on the defensive end in recent games. But yeah, the defense not really there. Like there's mismatches. He's just kind of slow. He's not the best athlete defensively. And then rebounding too, he just hasn't done a whole lot besides nail 3-pointers at a 43% rate. So I'm going B. Like you can't really complain if the guys came over from Evansville as a knockdown 3-point shooter, and that's all he's done. Like I don't know. So I'm going B. He can, like you said, there's more he can do if he wants to become an NBA player, like people were talking about. There's more he should do. But at the same time, like for this team, for this year, through the first 7 games, I'm cool with a B.
Trey White, here's one that's going to get a little more interesting. A guy that played 11 minutes against Arkansas, did not score. It's been a pretty slow start to the year for Trey, and it feels like his spot in the rotation is shrinking a little bit. What would you give him through 7 games?
I'll go C. Like I'm not obviously the Arkansas game wasn't good. He had 11 minutes, like you said. Potentially could be coming off the bench soon if Underwood wants to switch up the lineup, which I think he should. I believe you think he should as well. Um, but yeah, I'll go C. He hasn't been like he had a couple good games in the bye games after the Bama game, but overall the offense just like I had concerns for him coming into the year, and those concerns have kind of been I think people are kind of seeing them if they didn't before the year. He just doesn't really have like a specialty on offense. Like Ben Hummerkaus came here to be a 3-point shooter. Will Riley can pretty much do everything on offense. I could go down the list and name what these guys can do. Trey White really doesn't have a thing. Like he has not shot well from three, and he's been shooting a couple a game. Kind of has a mid-range, but this team doesn't shoot mid-ranges. Can get to the hoop decently, but he just hasn't done it a whole lot. He's rebounded well in some games he hasn't. I'm pretty comfortable with a C, and I'd also be pretty comfortable if we weren't seeing Trey White on the court as much.
I'll be the harsh grader here. I do think you need a lot more from Trey based on what you've gotten, and especially I think he's had a few good games. He had a 16.8 rebound game. I believe that was against Maryland Eastern Shore, if I'm not mistaken. Might have that exact game wrong. Maybe that was Little Rock. I can't remember exactly. One of those two. But 11 minutes against Arkansas, I think, was pretty telling. I don't think he played a ton in that Bama second half. I forget what his minutes count on that one was. But it feels like Brad Underwood doesn't have a lot of trust in him right now. And I think you brought him in to be a guy you can trust more so than even some of your freshmen. Not to say he was going to play more minutes than Will Riley at any point. Even as a starter, I don't think that was ever going to be the case. But I just think he hasn't been very good, really, in any regard so far, other than rebounding. I think he's rebounded well. I think his effort's been fine, and he's had a couple moments offensively, but just a non-shooter for this team. Part of me held out hope that, hey, maybe this is a guy that, we've seen him make free throws in his career. We've seen him make mid-range jump shots in his career. Can he get to 33% from three? And maybe he still can. He's at 28 right now, but that's more in line with what his career has been. The shot hasn't looked very good. And I just think some of the mental errors, like in that Bama game, man, he just had some mental mistakes on the defensive end, losing a 45% three-point shooter and some off-ball stuff that I don't think he's guarded all that well. I had high hopes for his ability to be a breakout defensive player. Hasn't shown itself so far. I'll go D plus on Trey because I think you need more. You need a lot more from him. He's kind of played himself off the floor in your two big games. And I still think he's kind of a mini X factor for this team. Like the Final Four version of Illinois has a consistent veteran bulldog, Trey White, who guards and who is a little bit better offensively. We haven't gotten that yet. Maybe we'll never get it, but that's kind of where I'm at with him. Two more. We'll go quick on these two, starting with Merez Johnson. I know you and I both are super high on this guy. I'll just start and say this guy's getting an A for me. The only thing keeping him from an A plus, he's fouled a lot, hasn't played as much as I would have wanted to see him play because he's been in foul trouble. Other than that, I mean, this is everything you could ask for from Merez. He's been a monster on the defensive end. He's averaging 22 rebounds per 40. It actually went down. He had 4 rebounds in 15 minutes against Arkansas. His per 40 went down 2 rebounds from 24. On last episode, he's hit 22 per 40 now. 1.6 blocks a game, leading Illinois in that in just 14 minutes. It's been awesome. His effort's incredible. His motor's incredible. Yes, he needs to get a little bit more polished offensively, needs to be a little bit better finisher, has to make his free throws more. But those were all deficiencies that when you signed him and when you brought him in, when you were projecting his freshman year, you knew were going to be there. And everything that you expected to get and more, in my opinion, you've gotten from Merez so far. Every time he's in the game, I think good things are happening for Illinois.
Yep, you hit the nail on the head. I'm gonna go A plus because I think I gave KG an A plus. Honestly, I forgot, but
3 A
if you're gonna
pluses
if
from
you're
you, man. Can you
yeah, I
teach
don't
one of
care,
my
man.
classes I'm in? Do you grade my paper in my history class?
Dude, saying this, I'm hyped up right now because I'm thinking back to the 2022 freshman class where we had Ty Rogers, Sincere, Jaden Epps, Sky Clark, so hyped up, the 4 freshmen, and then they were all not great, and the team kind of sucked. And then this team is just completely different. We're relying on the freshmen, and they've delivered through 7 games. So A plus for Merez. I mean, you said it, 14 minutes a game, 5 points, 7 rebounds, 2 blocks a game in 14 minutes. Like he's a raw freshman, and he's just been unbelievable so far. So yeah, I'm going A plus. Like if you're not gonna ding KJ for his
Yeah.
turnovers, I'm not gonna ding Merez for his fouls. So A plus.
I probably, in hindsight, should have given both those guys an A. I think the only true A plus I have is Tomislav Ivisic because I literally can't find a complaint if I try it, other than the fact that maybe he's a little slow-footed defensively. But Uh, yeah, maybe if I amend my grade, I'll stay consistent with it and give KJ and Morez an A. Final player, Dre Gibbs Lawhorn, who once again, similarly to last year, led the team in scoring. Well, not Will Riley led the team in scoring, but he led the team in scoring in the first half on opening night. Had a big offensive game on opening night. Hasn't had anything quite near that since. Still think he's done some good things off the bench for Illinois. Where would you land on him?
I need to see him do more against teams that aren't named Eastern Illinois. Obviously he didn't play. He barely played last year. He hasn't played a ton this year. He gets some minutes here and there off the bench. Good third guard. I'm gonna probably go C plus. Like he hasn't shot it particularly well. I love his energy defensively, but he's kind of prone to being like over aggressive in some spots where you can tell he's just going for steals and like trying to be the dog that Brad Underwood wants him to be. And it hurts him in some and hurts him in some places, works out in some places. But I think he's kind of here for offense. I want him to be a spark plug off the bench offensively, just like a microwave scorer. Hasn't really done that, so I'm gonna go C plus. I want to see a little bit more from Trey.
I'm at a C for him. He gets a passing grade. Hasn't done much to hurt Illinois, but hasn't necessarily stood out above anybody else either. Hasn't had maybe the impact that I was hoping he could have after that opening night performance and after that exhibition performance. And part of that's not all his fault because, I mean, you look at the guys on this team and the distribution of where your scoring's coming from and just the opportunities. His role isn't necessarily going to be to come in and have 18 points every night for you because he's just not going to get that opportunity with the guys you have. But I do think he's cooled off a little bit. I think there's some games. I had a bad game against Alabama in terms of his shot making. I don't care all that much about the percentages, but he has dipped down 38% from the floor, 28% from three so far. I think you'd like to see those numbers come up and just some more consistency from him. I feels like I haven't really noticed him as much. I felt like he was a guy coming into the year. It's like you're going to notice his presence on the floor. He's going to be a guy that's just a total spark plug, change the energy of a game when he comes off the bench. Still think he can do that, but I don't necessarily think he has since opening night. When he did that in the first half, it hasn't been very loud, his presence so far. So I'll stick him at a C and round it out there. All right, let's move on to close out the show. Illinois starts conference play on Friday night against Northwestern in Evanston, 8 p.m. Big Ten Network, first of two conference games. Now the Big Ten's been going on for, 5-6 years now that they've stuck these two conference games in December in the middle of non-conference play since they've gone to the 20-game schedule. I kind of like it, honestly. It's a good chance. I'm going to be excited to watch some other Big Ten games this week and kind of get a good gauge on some of the rest of the conference. And Illinois has historically done pretty well in these first two games in conference play and gotten their conference slate off to a pretty good start under Brad Underwood. And they'll have a chance to here as well, starting with Northwestern, which is a place that has been tough to go to the last few years. Now, the difference is Boo Buie is not walking through those doors, and that's a guy that you always had to worry about. He is out of eligibility. He is gone. But I think this is going to be a feisty Northwestern team. Chris Collins, I have a lot of respect for what he's done as a head coach and the way he coaches. And I still think this Northwestern team has some firepower on it, particularly two guys that I think are going to be tougher matchups for Illinois to deal with. You got two guys on this team early on in the season averaging 20 or more points a game in Nick Martinelli and Brooks Barnhizer. Barnhizer missed the first 4 games with an injury, has come back in his last 4, averaged 20 points and 8 boards. Martinelli started the year, I think, top 5 scoring nationally through his first 4 games and has cooled off a little since Barnhizer's come back, but those are your two forward/wing types in that lineup. You got, I think, Martinelli 6'7", Barnhizer 6'6". You see some Damask in Barnhizer's game. He's a guy that'll get to that mid-post area, back you down, play off that. Martinelli's kind of an underrated athlete, but he's got a lot of length, and he likes to work in that 8 to 10 foot area as well, and he's improved as an outside shooter as well. Those are kind of where it starts with this Northwestern team. It's not a guard-oriented team like it's been the last 5 years with Boo Buie. Now you're going to play through your wings a little bit more in your front court. But this should be an interesting game. Northwestern's always going to throw a lot of different looks at you defensively. Illinois' got to be prepared for some traps, for some hedges off screens. Matthew Nicholson will get out there and trap some screens, and KJ's got to be ready for that. Northwestern throws a lot of bodies at you and tries to create some havoc, and that's something Illinois hasn't really seen, maybe save for that exhibition game against Ole Miss. How do you feel heading into this matchup, in-state rivalry with the Wildcats? You know it's going to be Super Bowl time there at Evanston.
Yeah, they need their get back after that game at Wrigley. I was actually there. That was a really fun game to be at. But yeah,
How
you said a
cold
lot of
was
good
it?
stuff
Did you
there.
survive the weather?
Like first half I couldn't feel my hands, and then second half I couldn't feel my feet for some reason. So I mean that sucked, but a win is a win. Shout out the football team for a surprise 9-3
Oh,
season,
yeah.
potentially 10-3. I thought they were going 4-8 personally. So that was really fun to watch all year. But yeah, you said a lot of great things there, starting with just Chris Collins, I think as a whole. I think he deserves respect, like you said. I think he's in that tier of coach with like Greg Gard and even Matt Painter, where it doesn't really matter who they have on their roster. Like they're going to get a quality team out of whoever's playing for them. They're going to be gritty. They're going to be feisty. They're going to upset some teams at home, especially. Like I was talking with my brother the other day about how Welsh Ryan Arena at Evanston, it's not like a great atmosphere, but like Northwestern always just plays tough there. Illinois always has a tough time there, it seems like, even though they've won some close games as of late, lost some too, lost the one in overtime last year, I believe. But yeah, it's going to be a tough place to play, especially for some young freshmen, guys that haven't really played in an atmosphere like that. This is a game you mentioned a couple minutes ago, your Trey White X Factor take. This is a game where Trey White defensively, he's probably going to be on the floor a lot with 6'6" Martinelli, 6'6" Barnheiser. Like those are guys that we don't have great matchups for unless Trey White decides to lock in defensively, you know? So I think, yeah, that could be a huge game for him. I'm glad you mentioned that like 10 minutes ago. But yeah, Martinelli and Barnheiser, they play kind of a weird game. Like they're not, like you said, they're not boo booey. They're not crazy scoring guards. They don't take a ton of threes. They're kind of awkward players. I think Martinelli is one of like the weirdest, most unique players in the country, even.
Yeah.
So seeing him dominate was kind of fun. Like obviously it's Northwestern. I don't want to see them win a ton, but that was kind of fun to watch him just going for 30 and 15 every game to start the year. He's awkward. He can play low post, mid post. He can hit mid ranges, back you down. He can be physical. I think he's really fun to watch. And I'm curious to see how Illinois matches up with him. Ty Berry's a guy that's been there 4 or 5 years now, I want to say, and he's never really unlocked himself. He's a guy that you always want to see more from, and he's just been bad to start the year. I don't know if he's dealing with something, like he's just been really inefficient, hasn't scored much. So that's a guy that's kind of he's hit big shots against Illinois in the past, is what I'll say. So that's a guy that could be an X factor for Northwestern. But yeah, I think it just comes down to Illinois not being flustered, Illinois not getting rattled by whatever they see from Chris Collins, whether it's a press, trapping, like you mentioned, hedging. Because Northwestern does throw a lot of different looks at you. They've managed to knock off Purdue at home the past couple of years, and at the same time, they lose to Chicago State last year. They struggle with Eastern Illinois this year, I think it was. So they can be prone to playing to their competition level, but overall, really solid program as of late. Huge respect to Chris Collins, and yeah, excited for this game. Big matchup for Illinois.
Yeah, it'll be a test for Illinois offensively just because this is a Northwestern team that it really a program under Chris Collins that's kind of made their mark on the defensive end here recently. Obviously, you've had the guard play with Bowie, but these teams have been really good defensively. Again, 33rd defensive efficiency so far for them this year, and I think they've got the pieces to be pretty good on that end, and just kind of the unorthodox style they play where they're going to trap everything. You give them a mid. We saw them trap Damask in the mid post last year. Obviously, if you have a traditional big man, they're going to send traps at him all game long, and they're going to guard ball screens pretty aggressively as well. That's where I think Tomislav Ivisic and his skill set is going to be huge in this game, because if you do bring a guy like Matthew Nicholson out and you have him come trap a ball screen on KJ, you dump that ball off to Tomislav Ivisic, he's going to be sitting on the 3-point line ready to shoot or pass out of the short roll, and all of a sudden Northwestern's going to have to readjust that. Or obviously, if you're going to play man to man, you're not even going to run a ball screen offense. It's going to be tough for a guy like Matthew Nicholson to come out and guard a Vicic on the perimeter. And hey, if you want to throw a Vicic in the low post a little bit, throw it into him and say, hey, come trap him. We trust his passing ability and his ability to play out of that. I think you could see Illinois' guards kind of get down low a little bit and try to force Northwestern to bring extra help on them. If you put KJ in a one-on-one and you just kind of let KJ back a guy down a little bit, dare Northwestern to bring help and say, hey, KJ, you know exactly what to do here. I mean, you send a double team onto KJ, I think the night's over for Northwestern. You're going to have 13 assists, and that's going to be problematic. But they're so staunch in that principle under Chris Collins that I think Illinois can kind of try to bait him into that. But at the same time, Northwestern can turn you over. They're top 70 in turnover rate. They're a team that causes a lot of havoc. KJ, a guy who's struggled not defensively, he's struggled with his turnovers at times, has the ability to turn it over if he's not prepared for some of the ways Northwestern's going to guard. And I just think they're an aggressive defense that is really well coached, executes well on that end. Offensively, I have a lot of questions still about this Northwestern team, although I do think it's a pretty good matchup for them because they have those two unique kind of wing/forward types with Martinelli and Barnheiser. Those guys are physical. Those guys can score in a couple different ways. We saw it, obviously, neither of those guys are anywhere close to the athlete that Adu Thero is for Arkansas. But in terms of body type and kind of some of the strengths offensively, we saw a guy in Thero get to the line 21 times. You had Ben Humrickhouse guarding him for 60% of the game. Humrickhouse probably going to have to guard one of those two guys. And I just don't think Illinois has great matchups for that type of player. And Northwestern's got two of them playing at a high level right now. So I do worry a little bit about that, but this Northwestern team also just doesn't have the guard play that they've had in years past. Jalen Leach is a solid player, transfer from Fairfield's, had a good start to the year. Kylan Boswell, your table's set for that matchup. I trust him, and I don't think other than him they got much else at all in terms of perimeter shot making and guards that can go score and get downhill on you. So I think Illinois should be able to handle this matchup, but I do think Northwestern can throw some unique things at them that they'll be tested with.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. They're such a weird team. Really good team, obviously, but they throw different stuff at you. They play super slow. The defense is super reliable every single year under Chris Collins. And just being at home, it's the first like true road game for Illinois. It's going to be a great atmosphere, like you said. It's kind of their Super Bowl. They sell it out every year, even though 60% of it's Illinois fans. But
It's true, yeah. It'll be a
yeah,
nice
I
split
think
there. A lot of orange in that building. Although the students really, I don't think they care about basketball all year except when Illinois comes to town. The student section is full, chanting stuff at players.
yeah, pretty much. But yeah, I think Illinois could definitely run into some issues. I think Chris Collins and these veteran guys like Martinelli and Barnheiser can maybe take advantage of a young KJ, like you just talked about it. But I mean, he could be turnover prone. He could get flustered a little bit, and I think you're going to need other guys to step up. It's going to be a low scoring game, in my opinion, because Northwestern just plays super slow. Um, yeah, I don't know. Like we talked about the Barnheiser and Martinelli matchups. You're going to need Will Riley and Trey White and Ben Humrickhouse, like you said, to really step up and try to limit those guys. But even if those guys kind of get taken away, Northwestern always just seems to find a way to maybe have one guy go off. Like maybe Jalen Leach somehow he rubs. Ty Berry has his breakout game. So I'm not sold on Illinois. Like I don't think anybody's predicting an Illinois blowout. I'm certainly not. I think Northwestern's a really good team. That'll probably be one of those Big Ten teams that's on the bubble this year and fighting for a tournament spot all the way through the Big Ten tournament. But yeah, I think it's going to be a really close game, pretty low scoring. I don't think Illinois is going to shoot it particularly well. And I think it's probably just going to come down at the end to who has the better players, who has the better possessions late game. And I kind of do trust Illinois. Even though they're young, I trust Illinois to deliver late game. We saw a lot of it last game with KJ. We saw them kind of come back against Alabama late in the game. They delivered a couple nice runs in the late to mid to late second half. So I trust Illinois to win this one. I'm going to go like 71-70. I think it's a really fun, close game to start off Illinois' Big Ten slate. I know Northwestern plays I want to say Iowa tomorrow or Wednesday. So yeah,
Tuesday
it's
night.
a
Yep.
Tuesday night. I'll definitely be tuned into that one to see how Northwestern does against another solid Power Five team. But yeah, I'm going 71-70. Illinois pulls it out for another nice win to start December.
Yeah, I think the one thing you mentioned there, and I'm with you, I think Illinois wins this game. Illinois can't let this game get as ugly as Northwestern's going to want to make it in terms of pace, because that's just, I mean, ultimately we saw how efficient Illinois' half-court offense can be in that Arkansas game, but Illinois wants to play fast still, and they're just have such an athleticism and speed advantage over what this Northwestern roster has, that the way Northwestern beats you Friday night is if they play their game and they just frustrate the heck out of you in the half court and slow this game down, make it a 64 possession game to where it's just this some Illinois freshmen just are trying to all of a sudden get a little sped up late, and they're just not comfortable playing that style. Illinois got to make sure that Northwestern doesn't Northwestern this game to them, as we've seen teams do under Chris Collins here, including the Illinois teams. Although the Illinois Northwestern matchup in Evanston last year was about as Illinois Northwestern like as we've ever seen, as I think both those teams got to the 90s in that one. So if that goes that way, I think Illinois is in good shape here. I think Illinois gets the win. I agree. I think this is going to be a single-digit game. I think Northwestern can frustrate Illinois at times. I don't think Illinois' offense is going to have quite the night that it had against Arkansas, but Illinois just has such a far superior roster to what this Northwestern team has, and ultimately I'm not all that scared of the road environment there at Evanston. I think it's a good place for Illinois, this young Illinois team, to have their first road game. I do think that place in the last couple of years, you give them credit, and they've made it better, and Chris Collins has gotten a better turnout, made it a better environment, but you do have to deal with a 50% orange crowd there when Illinois comes to town. I think that'll play to Illinois' advantage. I got the Illini 79-70 winning this game. I do think they pull away late. And I think they hold down Northwestern enough in this one to get it done. That should pretty much wrap things up here. I do one note I want to say here as we enter the month of December. I mentioned it briefly earlier. 5 of Illinois' next 6 games, as it stands right now, are Quad 1 opportunities. It is going to get really interesting for Illinois. This is a massive month for this Illini team here in December. You obviously got the 2 conference games. You go at Northwestern on Friday, and then you host Wisconsin, 8-0, 15th ranked Wisconsin. How in the hell they've done that so far with this team beats me, but they're doing it again. Greg Gard finding a way, and they're coming to Champaign on Tuesday. And then you've got the number 1 team in the net currently and the number 7 team in the country, Tennessee, in Champaign. After that, then you got the bragging rights game against Missouri. That's a top 50 net team. Chicago State after that, but then at Oregon, another 8-0 team who has gotten off to a phenomenal start so far. They're 12th in the AP poll. So it's going to be a big-time month for Illinois, and we're going to learn a lot about this team, a chance for this team to really set itself up for success by banking some quality wins, but also a chance that this team does go through some growing pains and get some things exposed early on, because you're going to be playing the best of the best. Any last thoughts as Illinois enters a pretty critical month here?
My final thought is that Greg Gard is well on his way to another phony Big Ten Coach of the Year award.
Can I just say this right now? Like, if this Illinois team finishes in the top 3 of the Big Ten and Brad Underwood doesn't win Coach of the Year, we need to get rid of the award. He hasn't won one yet, and it's all been because his teams have been expected to be good every year, and they're good, and so we can't reward that. We got to reward the guy that was projected by the preseason people to finish 13th, but they ultimately were good. Maybe don't predict Wisconsin to finish 16th, because they never do under Greg Gard, and we wouldn't have this problem. I'm going to be making the pitch all season long that if this Illinois team reaches its ceiling and is a top 10, 15 team in the country and competes for a Big Ten title, Brad Underwood needs his first Coach of the Year, because he'd be doing it with 10 new players and reshaping an entire roster, building a brand new team, and still owning this conference. So I'm just going to say that.
Yeah, I'm with you. He should have won it once or twice. Also, I'm still mad about like Ida Sumo being the second best player in the country, Kofi Coburn not winning Player of the Year, like typical anti-Illini bias. TSJ not being a first team All-American, that was a different situation. But yeah,
Still,
our
yeah,
day will
he
come.
was about as deserving as anybody. But thanks for listening to the Champagne on Ice podcast. We will be back after that Northwestern game to break that one down and preview a big time matchup as a top 15 Wisconsin squad comes to Champaign on Tuesday. That'll be out over the weekend, so stay tuned for that. Until then, drop us a follow on our Twitter at Champagne on Ice. Subscribe to the Field of 68 Podcast Network YouTube channel. We stream all our episodes live there, and get us wherever else you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Google. You can find us at all those places, and stick with us all season long as we got some fun matchups coming up and cannot wait to break them down. Until then, hope everybody has a great rest of their week. Enjoy the game on Friday.